Hi, I'm Dr. Keith Cagle. I live here in North Carolina, in Charleston. I have deaf parents. And I went to the Oregon Institute for the Deaf. Then I graduated from RIT in New York. I did go to California for my BA in education. Then I went back to New York. After 2 years, I moved down to DC. Before I came here, I went to New Mexico and went to the University of New Mexico. And I got my PhD in education. And that was for 1 year, and now I'm back here. The topic for my thesis was about ASL lexical signs, and if they actually could be 1,000 years old. And that was the basis for my PhD paper. And that this will be exploring the ancestral roots of American Sign Language, lexical borrowing signs, from French Sign Language or Cistercian Sign Language. A lot of people haven't seen this word, Cistercian. So I'm going to explain a little bit about it. It's from the Middle Ages. It's very old. There are two groups of monks, and the Cistercian monks, they recorded some of the gestures and signs that they would use. In 1068 AD, they worked at Cluny Monastery in France. And in 1789 to 1799, they moved over to America. And they did research there on CSL, the Cistercian Sign Language. Now, to French Sign Language. And it's called LSF in France, in French language. Not French Sign Language, it's FSL in the French language. Now, French Sign Language seemed to start in around 1761. With Abbé de la Paix. He set up the first deaf school in Paris. He started kind of combining all the different sign languages that were around together to create LSF. So CSL and LSF are both relatively old. Then there's modern French Sign Language. We're going to talk about old ASL and modern ASL, as well as researching Indian Sign Language and Japanese Sign Language. You may wonder why I'm talking about Indian Sign Language and Japanese Sign Language. They're more related to iconic signs. Or ASL, so excuse me, ASL and CSL and FSL or LSF are very iconic. Indian and Japanese Sign Language are very different than what we typically know. So I'm going to look at how all these different ASL or sign languages influence each other. So the CSL dictionary was printed in 1975. They had pictures down the sides, and then they would have the word and explain what the word means next to the sign. So 1975 is relatively recent, but the dictionary was created from signs that were passed down over generations. So I can compare these with old French Sign Language, and it's an interesting comparison. Now, I also researched old LSF, or French Sign Language. This has 3 different dictionaries. Broland printed a dictionary in 1855, and it had nice drawings of pictures of the LSF sign language. That was 1855. And another person who did these drawings was Pelletier in 1856. And a third LSF dictionary was created by Lambert in 1865. And they all combined into one book. The CSL dictionary has about 537 lexical signs. The 3 old LSF dictionaries have over 800 lexical signs. Modern LSF dictionary has hundreds, and as well as ASL and the ASL Handshake Dictionary. Indian Sign Language and Japanese Sign Language have hundreds as well. So CSL has 324 authorized signs, or 24 lexical items in their authorized list of signs. And about 213 lexical items in the St. Joseph Abbey's listing of signs. And after adding all together, there's about 497. So I can't explain all 497, but I'm going to look at 555 lexical signs. And I'm going to do two comparisons, one from a deaf Japanese teacher and one from a hearing Japanese person. These two people helped me narrow it down to a list of 55 lexical signs. So there's 4 different categories for why I chose each of these 55 signs. So the first category is CSL lexical signs that have a stronger resemblance to LSF. So the first sign is after. So CSL and LSF look about the same, but ASL is different. Another sign we'll look at is fever. And these are authorized signs. So that once again, the CSL lexical sign and the LSF lexical sign look about the same. But in ASL, it's different. Another sign we'll look at is plate. So the old sign for CSL is pointing at your hand like this. And the old LSF sign, this is modern LSF now, excuse me, but it does point at your hand also. So they're almost the same. But the ASL sign is the shape of a plate, so it's different. Another word we'll look at is pour. The CSL authorized lexical sign is like this with your hand out. The old LSF sign from 1855 looks exactly the same. The ASL sign looks different once again. Next sign is rule. The CSL sign looks like this. The 1856 LSF sign is a little bit the same, but with a movement. The ASL Handshake Dictionary gives a completely different sign. The next word is ugly. The old LSF and this old CSL lexical sign once again look about the same. But our ASL sign is completely different. So that's the first group, the one that CSL and LSF have a resemblance with each other. But ASL looks different. So this next group is where CSL and LSF our CSL looks similar to both LSF and ASL. So this is the sign for black in the old CSL lexical signing. And the LSF sign and the ASL sign look relatively the same, but the ASL has a movement. The old CSL sign for pray is on the authorized list, and it looks like this, hands folded together. Now, the LSF sign had two ways to do it. You could either interlace your fingers or just have your palms together like this, and that's how the ASL lexical sign looks. So the LSF sign is almost like a bridge between the CSL lexical sign and the current ASL sign. Another sign is tomorrow. The old CSL sign looks like this. Now the old LSF sign in the 1856 dictionary looks like this. And our ASL sign looks almost the same as the LSF sign. So that's the second group. So where CSL looks like ASL and LSF, they're pretty close. This third group is where CSL looks very similar to LSF and pretty similar, moderately resemblant to ASL. So the old CSL sign looks like this, and the old French in 1855 looks like this, and so the ASL looks relatively similar, but it has a movement to it. This is the sign for heat or hot. And the old sign for this in CSL looks like this. And the French sign is exactly the same. Now the ASL sign is the same, but it has a movement to it. But it's pretty close. The next word is low. And the old CSL sign is like the old LSF sign. They're exactly the same. Our modern ASL sign looks like this, so it's a little bit higher than the LSF and CSL sign. Now the word for meat in the old CSL sign language, lexical signs, looks like this. In the 1855 French sign language, is the same. It looks pretty close, as does the ASL one. Now, the old CSL sign for milk is on the authorized list of lexical signs, and it looks like this. The old LSF sign is exactly the same. Now our ASL sign, our modern ASL sign, is a little bit different, but it looks pretty similar. Another word that we'll discuss is work. That's on the old lexical sign from the authorized list. Now this is a modern LSF dictionary, but it does look exactly the same as the old CSL. And our modern ASL sign is a little bit different. And now our fourth group is that they're all three are similar. CSL, LSF, and ASL have a very strong resemblance. And the word hard in the old CSL and the old LSF in 1856 and our old ASL sign all look the same. Our new sign is a little bit different, but it looks very similar. Another word that looks the same is like. And the CSL sign and the old French Sign Language looks the same, and we do that, the same sign, but for the word love. Another word in this group is red. The old CSL sign looks like this. The old LSF sign from the 1856 dictionary looks like this. And our modern ASL sign for red is the same, but with a movement added to it. Another word in this category is same as. This is from the CSL list. It looks like this. The old French Sign Language from 1855 looks the same, and our modern ASL sign is also the same. Another word in this category is think. From the CSL authorized list of lexical signs, it looks like this. The old LSF sign from 1865 looks the same. And our modern ASL think is the same as well. Now this is the last one. This is the word what. The old CSL sign from St. Joseph's Abbey list looks like this with your palms out. The LSF from 1855 looks about the same. And ASL is the same way. They all look very similar. It's very interesting. So I looked at all these four categories. And I looked at the four parameters: location, palm orientation, hand shape, and movement. I looked to see which was most common out of all of them. Which parameter was most common to the similar signs. Location was the most common, with 74.5% similar. The second most common was palm orientation, so which way your palm is facing, and that's 70.9%. The third was the hand shape, and that was 63.6%. And the last one was movement, and that was 58%. And I don't know why some have movements, some do. It's hard to see the movement in the dictionaries, the old dictionaries. The CSL dictionaries describe it very clearly, but some dictionaries don't. So if other people are wanting to research these different parameters, I would suggest looking at the CSL dictionary because it's very clear. In borrowing and contact, I will discuss phonological clues and phonological history, as well as morphological complexities, cognates, geographical clues. That means what area they're from. And then the last one is semantic clues. And these 5 subjects support my research. They are borrowed from CSL to French Sign Language and then to American Sign Language. So phonological clues, I'll give an example from CSL and old LSF, how they're the same. After, meet, pray, ugly, fever, milk, and rule. These phonological clues support the borrowing and contact. And the CSL, old LSF, and ASL lexical signs with a strong resemblance also have similar phonological aspects and clues for figuring out the contact. So now phonological history and the geographical clues. In the year 1068, CSL sign was in France. Then LSF started years later in 1761, also in France. ASL was started with Laurent Clerc, who was from France, and he helped, in 1816, he helped create ASL. So they all have a similar history, and they started from the same area. So that also just supports my discussion and my argument of borrowing and contact signs. The morphological clues are very interesting. We've noticed that older signs tend to have many more morphological parts to it, and the later signs tend to get shortened up. For example, the CSL sign for animal, or ox, includes animal and cow to create that, but LSF and ASL shorten that and have less morphological aspects of it. Another example is the sign for plate. Back in the use of CSL, there were more aspects to it, but now through LSF and then to ASL, it's become very shortened to just one morphological aspect. So I'm going to add a little bit to my phonological findings. We notice a change in the number of hands being used from 2 to 1. There's also a change in where the sign is created. So the signs moved to the center of the body as well as from the head to the center of the body. Some old signs from CSL have changed in just one aspect, one parameter, from LSF to LSF and ASL. For example, the sign black changed locations from CSL. It changed locations into LSF and ASL. The sign cat in CSL used 2 hands, and now in LSF and ASL it uses 1 hand, so the hand shape has changed. Oh, so there, that's Also, in CSL and LSF, milk uses 2 hands, but in ASL it uses 1 hand. The same with remain or stay in ASL. Uses 1 hand for CSL, and FLS, LSF, it uses 1. The centralization of lexical signs moves all the signs to the center of the body. For example, low in CSL and LSF was lower down, and in ASL moved up more to the center of the body. As well as like in CSL and LSF was more on the left side, but in ASL the sign for love is in the center. Previously, signs that used to move the head now have hand movements instead of head movements. For example, the sign flower, light, and thank you. Now instead of moving your head, you have a hand movement. Another thing I'm going to discuss is I noticed some semantic changes to the signs. Interesting, the sign for water in old CSL looked like this. Now, our sign for wet looks similar to that. It has the same hand shape as the old sign for water, but our sign for water is different. But wet is related back to the old sign for water. Another example is in CSL and LSF, the word after looks like the current word for late in ASL. The old CSL sign and LSF sign for like and love is now our sign, or like is now our sign in ASL for love. The old LSF sign for pick looks a lot like our word earn. The old CSL sign and LSF sign for pour looks a lot like our ASL sign for beg, and they are related. The meaning changed, but they are related semantically. The old CSL and LSF sign for ugly looks like our ASL, modern ASL version of angry, so semantics changed. For future researchers, I would recommend searching more CSL dictionaries. They have quite a few dictionaries in Europe for those. I would also recommend comparing more ASL and CSL and finding the similarities and the connection between CSL, LSF, and American Sign Language. For example, the difference between wet and water, the old sign and the new sign. I'd also recommend researching more iconicity analysis for people who don't know sign language. That's something that they can look at and recognize what it might mean even if they don't understand sign language. I think it'd also be important to research initialization in LSF and see how we borrowed that into ASL. I I also think it'd be interesting to compare ASL and Indian Sign Language. Interesting to note that Indians used sign language to help our army years and even before we started creating ASL in America. So that would be interesting to research. It would also be good to research Martha's Vineyard Sign Language. What signs they used and what signs they shared and how they were related to ASL today. So to summarize, my question I asked you is it possible that some of our American Sign Language lexical signs are nearly 1,000 years old? CSL started in 1068 AD, but gesturing had started 500 years before that, so I'm not sure. Now when you go home, you'll think about how our signs have morphed from then. Thank you.